I like, click, subscribe, do all that. You already know what time it is. It's Netflix time. This movie's called $1 Million Baby. When a cantankerous trainer mentors a persistent amateur boxer determined to go pro, deep-seated emotions become their strongest opponents. This movie came out in 2004. It's 2 hours and 12 minutes long. Shit, me crying every time I watch it. Spoiler alert, let's get it. So it starts out with two fighters in a ring. The black one's name's Willie. Luke Cage before he was Luke Cage. Anyway, his trainer Frankie. Clint Eastwood, obviously. He tells him to lean into the punches, which he does, and told him to drop his left hand so he can take the hit. Now that's either going to give a certain type of fighter an adrenaline or it's going to do something else. As you can see, this guy laid out, it gave Willie some adrenaline. Here in the shadows, we got a boxer by the name of Maggie watching on the fight. We found out she was in the undercard of the main event. After the fight, she meets up with Frankie. Frankie's like, man, do I owe you money or something? She wants desperately for Frankie to be a trainer, but he's like, I don't train girls. I don't think he's being sexist, though. I think he's got his reasons. After the fight, Willie and Frankie got pushed their old jalopy. So at this point, Willie wants a title shot, but Frankie's like, man, just give it like 2 or 3 more fights. Willie's like, man, you always say 2 or 3 more fights. He wants to make sure he's ready, but he's like, how much more ready am I going to be? I guess you could say that's his way of protecting his fighter. Eventually, you're going to have to let him off the leash, dog. When he gets home, he prays before he goes to sleep, and he goes to church. And he goes to church every Sunday. Matter of fact, I think he goes to church every day. But he always has these sarcastic banters back and forth with the priest. And I ain't gonna lie, it's quite hilarious. Hey, then we get a look at that gym. Here we got a boxer who's not really all that skilled. His name is Danger. His mission in life is to fight Tommy the Hitman Hearns. They say his people's dropped him off one day and ended up back in Texas, and he came out here just straight broke. He's got a slick mouth, but he means well. Speaking of slick, we got Mr. Scraps. Morgan Freeman in the motherfucking house. And he runs the gym alongside with Frankie. He's always talking about challenging the Motor City Cobra and whatnot. It's hilarious. And here we got Shaw. He's training. He's like, all right, I had enough of this goddamn Danger. Anthony Mackie in the house. So Shaw wants Danger to get into the ring. Like, come on, let's get it popping. But Scraps looks over like, hey, Shaw, cut that shit out, man. Because, Shaw just want to get him in there and just hurt him. See, Scraps has got a soft spot for Danger. And besides, he doesn't want him doing anything crazy and getting his confidence down. And he tells Danger to go back to training. You thought you was going to bring him down? You ain't doing that yet. Frankie comes back and starts complaining to Scraps about buying, super expensive bleach. Like, it's all bleach. It's the same thing. Scraps tells him it smells better. He's like, look, it's fucking bleach. Frankie just really wants him to save money because Scraps don't have no money like that. And then Willie comes in and hits the gym. But he's looking at Willie kind of hard for a second because he's hanging around Sally Mendoza, but more specifically in the middle, Mickey Mack. Now, they're good managers, but they're also managers that do happen to have their own agendas. Scraps tells Frankie the situation about him talking to Sally Mendoza and really not talking to Mickey Mack. Then he gets him to look out the window, like, hey, who's your new girl? Frankie's like, what the fuck you talking about? And sure enough, Maggie popped in hitting the bags. He's like, look, I don't train girls. She's like, man, I thought you might change your mind. He's like, there's plenty of people that train girls. She's like, nah, but I want you to train me. She keeps calling him boss. He's like, I don't want to hear that boss shit. And then he goes over to work with Willie. But she gonna keep working on the bag, and she ain't gonna take no for an answer. Now, she grew up in Missouri, and her other side gig is being a waiter. And she's been a waiter for like almost a decade. It's so bad that she takes leftover food that she ate for dinner that she served to other people. It's crazy. She gets caught by the boss and is like, hey, it's for my dog. She had to come up with some kind of excuse, right? Frankie tells Scraps to give her her money back. He's like, you sure? She done already paid like 6 months. He's like, nah, don't be a smartass about it, man. Just keep it. Then he gets pissed off at Danger. He's like, what the heck is he doing? What is he looking at? He's just like looking inside of a bottle. Then Frankie asks his Danger paid his dues. Scraps is like, dues? This nigga can't even afford a pair of pants. He's like, all right, man, get out of here. I gotta come up with something. So it gets to be nighttime. Scraps is still there. Apparently, Scrap lives in the gym. And he notices out the corner of his eye, Maggie is still there on the training. He says, don't tell Frankie I told you this, but I'm about to give you some tips. Tells her about her footwork and moving around with the power shots. Scrap shows her his room and where he lives at, and she thinks it's just so cool that he's just living here. It's not a whole lot to it, but to her, it's like a masterpiece, right? Considering where she came from. She does some more training, hops on the bus, and heads back home. Next day, Frankie's working with Willie, and of course, Maggie's back again. And of course, here they go again. They got to pick on Danger. Then he's like, hey, Danger, I found somebody you could beat. And he starts pointing to Maggie. Then Maggie hits him with a comeback as he's talking trash. She's like, yeah, I saw your last fight. You spent so much time on the ground, I thought the canvas had titties. They was clowning Shaw, and Shaw ain't like that. Oh, my niggas laughing. Even Frankie had to laugh at that shit. He tells his man to hold it back so he can get back to training. Yo, mad. Then Willie's got a situation with his girl about getting his old car back or something like that. And of course, Frankie's going to help him out. Now, I think he's been training him for at least about 8 years. So they got a bond. So apparently Scraps gave her a speed bag and Frankie was like, you ain't ready for the speed bag yet. He's like, that's my speed bag, and if people think you're hitting the speed bag, they're going to think I'm training you. Which is obviously what she wants. But after a while, he ends up letting her keep the bag. He's like, man, I haven't seen that bag in like 20 years anyway. Besides, I got 3 more of them. But she says she just wants to borrow it until she can buy her own. He's getting soft on her a little bit, just a little bit. Later on, I guess he's trying to rearrange a deal on a title fight. Yeah, it's a title fight for Willie. And then Willie pops up and he just wants to thank him for getting Grace's car back. Frankie had just got off the phone with Hogan for the 7-10 split with the title match, but then Willie comes up to him and says, man, I gotta leave you. He says he's only got one shot and he's gotta take it. You know what I mean? And he thanks Frankie for teaching him everything he knows. Basically, Mickey Mac took Willie away from under him. Yeah. So they got Danger in the ring. Eventually, he's going to throw a punch, right? While Danger's thinking about his footwork and all that, Scraps knows something's up with Frankie. Remember how I said Danger always wanted to fight Tommy the Hitman Hearns? Well, nobody had the heart to tell him that he retired years ago. And that was like his big motivation for even being in the gym to begin with, right? So Frankie tells Scraps the situation about Willie. Scraps talks about guiding Willie's career and all that other stuff. But then he lets him know you basically protected him out of a championship fight. So you knew eventually Willie had to go get his. While that's going on, Maggie's still popping off at the speed bag. Does her waiter job, trains, and all that. She goes to the store, she finally got herself enough money to get her own speed bag. Frankie at home chilling on TV, watching TV. He's watching Willie's championship fight. And of course, Willie wins the title. And of course, Frankie's happy as he's gonna be. He shows up with a cheeseburger for Scraps to talk about the fight. Then they share a little story about Scraps' last fight. They talk a little bit about the aftermath from it, but then Frankie hears a noise. Scraps is like, yeah, that's Maggie out there. She just had another birthday. So Frankie finally gives her a tip and tells her about her breathing. So after a little bit of convincing, he finally decides to take her on. Under the tutelage of Frankie. Then we get a montage of her doing work, hitting the bag, and all that good stuff. So she wants to finally have a fight. Frankie's like, when you get your manager, you get a fight. Then they start talking about family stuff, and Frankie has a daughter who he's not exactly close to, but he sends her letters every day. Then Frankie calls over Sally Mendoza. Scraps looking at Frank like, alright, what the fuck are you doing? And he gives Maggie over to Sally. I'm like, well, okay. Scraps knows what's up. He's seeing through the bullshit. Like I said, Sally's an okay manager, but he always has his own interests at heart, as does Mickey Mac. But he can keep those type of guys around because the difference is, their interests won't make a difference if the boxer's ready for the fight. The thing is, we're not sure if she's ready. And putting her with somebody like him can either make or break a fighter. So she has her first fight, she's not really doing as well. Sally throws a little words of encouragement, but I don't think he really genuinely is into the fight. See, look at that face. He's all disinterested. Frankie and Scraps are watching the fight from above. The first fight you stick her in there is with a chick named Lonnie who was like 11-0. Come on, Frankie, you can't let it go down like this. So Frankie's had enough. He comes down to the ring. He gives us some tips like, stop dropping your left hand. Then he gives Sally an earful. The referee's trying to figure out what's going on, and Frankie legit claims her as his fighter. You can't even imagine how happy she is hearing him say that right now. And they give her the pointers. Yep. And then the infinite melee. You see it? Wham! Death. And they be like, you see how she ducked with the overhand right? That's what Sugar Ray would do. Yeah, I get the references. Y'all got a little carried away with that one, all right? I'll let that slide, though. He always tells her the number one rule, protect yourself at all times. Then he assures her he'll never leave her again, and he's like, hey, that place you work has homemade pie? She's like, no, that's some man-made bullshit. Hilarious banter with the priest again. Then Frankie and Scraps have a conversation about socks. Trust me, it's hilarious. Then Maggie has a bunch of fights, and she's pretty much knocking niggas out in the first round. It was getting to the point he was having a hard time placing bets because she was giving niggas the business. Then he got desperate and took a chance. He moved Maggie up in the weight class. Fortunately, it paid off for her. Got a broken nose in the process, but nevertheless, she won the fight. And at this point, Frankie's definitely taking a liking to Maggie. And I've always wondered, does Maggie remind Frankie of his daughter, the one he's on bad terms with? But they never show in the movie, so we don't know. Maggie was knocking niggas out so early, it got to a point where Frankie just started looking at his watch and started timing and shit. Meanwhile, we get a shot at the WBA welterweight champion, the Blue Bear. Apparently, she used to be a prostitute and she became the dirtiest fighter in all the rank in boxing. I'm talking about she would grab on people, throw them, then punch them after she's throwing them on the ground. Just dirty. I mean, it's only so much you can get away with in the ring, but the people loved her anyway. Promoters wanted Maggie to fight her, but he turned it down instantly. He also turned down a British champion too. Obviously doing that without her knowledge. He tells her if she protects her face better, he won't have to turn all this stuff down. And she says with her face out there so much, it's a miracle I ain't been knocked out yet. She's got a fair point, dog. She goes back to the gym to train some more, but Scraps meet up with her and she wants to take her out. Takes her out, gives her a cupcake because apparently a whole year went by, it's her 33rd birthday. And then Mickey Mac walks into the bar. I smell a setup. And then he tells Maggie the story about his last fight and how he lost his right eye in the process. There's a lot to the story and you can watch the movie for that. So after Scraps leaves, Minnie Mac makes his pitch. She doesn't mean any disrespect and she appreciates the things and sees the things that she's doing for Willie, but as far as she's concerned, she's sticking with Frankie. And that's the bottom line. She loyal to Frankie. We go back to Frankie's house, we see all these shoe boxes. And inside all the letters that he sent to his daughter, who she sent back, didn't even read not near one of them. And I'm like, damn, what the fuck did he do for her to resent him that much? Later on, she goes by Maggie's place, talks to her about wanting to buy a house and stuff. But the real reason he came by was to give her a tape of the British girl that she's gonna fight. Yes, he booked her a championship match. Obviously, she's showing her gratitude. And he's like, all right, let's just play the tape. And she's like, I don't have a TV. It's like, how are we going to watch it? So eventually they watch the tape, they're getting ready for the fight, and he gives her a robe that says Mokushli. What it stands for, I'll tell you towards the end. She comes out ready for the beef, the crowd's going fucking ridiculous, and they start chanting more Kushli at her. It's going crazy. Now the crazy thing about this fight, she was only on the middle card, but after the fight, nobody even remembered the main event. Matter of fact, the only thing they remembered was her that night. That's how you know she was serious. It was a hell of a battle, but then in the second round, she caused death and mayhem, and we got a new champ. British welterweight champ anyway. She fought all over the states after that. Giving niggas the business, you got promoters looking on. They try to do 60-40 deals, but it's going to end up being 50-50. So she tells Frankie she finally bought a house, but it's not for her, it's for her mom. But her mom doesn't know about it yet. So her mom lives in a trailer, her sister's a junkie, her dad died. A lot of other stuff happened to her, but that's typically her backstory. So she goes to the trailer park to visit her mom and her sister and takes them over to their new house. But instead of being happy, all they're doing is complaining. She tells about the government finds out about this house, they're going to start cutting off her welfare and stuff. She tells about Medicaid is going to cut her off and all this stuff. But Maggie's just like, I'll send you the money, I don't care. She's like, just ask me. Basically, they like living on welfare cheese, and they're just being ungrateful, honestly. She still tells her the house is hers. It's like, hey, if you want the money, sell the house then. And Frankie sees a little bit what she's been dealing with. Then her mom has the nerve to ask who's been hitting on her. And she's like, clearly it's from the fight. Which lets you know right there, after she's told her mom doesn't watch none of her fights. She tells her to find a man, live proper, all this other stuff. Now, her own mother is telling her, well, when people hear about her, they're laughing at her about what she's doing with her life. But I find it absurd that she would know that because you didn't even know what the fuck she was doing. You weren't even watching her damn fights. And to this day, her character still pisses me off. Still feeling discouraged about what her mom was saying. They ride to the gas station. She sees a little girl playing with her dog, and she gets happy again. Can't too much keep her down. She's always in high spirits. Later on, she takes Frankie to the spot where sells the best pie, and he loves it. Next day, we back at the gym. So Danger has a question to ask. Remember, it's been times they always caught him looking through a water bottle? He's been trying to figure out how you get all this ice through the tiny little hole for the water. I'm like, are you fucking serious? Basically, he didn't know that you could freeze water. And that's why Scraps need to keep him around, because if he can't figure that out, he'd be fucked up on the streets. Later on, Frankie finally lets Maggie decide on something. So she decides to fly to the flight, and then we drive back. And he goes along with it. Later on, back at the gym, Shaw tells Scraps the toilet's over flooding. But as he's fixing that, it was all set up so Shaw could beat the hell out of Danger. Scraps hears the commotion and comes back. Obviously doing it to make it seem like they're sparring, but really, come on now. So Scrap is trying to keep him going, but he's definitely going to be pissed off at Shaw because he feels like it's going to bring down Danger's confidence, getting his ass whipped like this. Yeah, Shaw, you done fucked up now. Now Scraps is about to give you the business. And he got laid out by Scraps and made him spit out a tooth. God damn. He said that's what you get for picking on Danger. When he turns back around, he sees that Danger left. He's just hoping that he comes back, man. But on to the main event, Maggie versus the Big Bear for the WBA welterweight title. Hell of a matchup, but you know Bear was going to start fighting dirty eventually. Later on, Maggie comes back and gives her the fucking business, but she got up at 9 and the beef kept going. Round 3, she's getting fucking meleeed. The Bear's going down. Then after the bell rang, the Bear hit her with a cheap shot. They're ready to put the stool back in the ring so she can sit down. And Bear hits her with a fucking cheap shot. Frankie's like, what the fuck? She tried to move the chair and the neck landed on her. I was like, oh, she landed on the stool. God damn, yo. Yeah, everybody saw that shit. Bear, you piece of shit. Don't be acting all concerned now. You always doing cheap shots. Fuck out of here. And Maggie was pretty much laid out, man. Next thing you know, she wakes up in the hospital. First person she sees is Frankie. He's gonna do everything he can for her. While Frankie's calling up all these different doctors, Scraps is talking to her. The doctor already told her the situation. Frankie doesn't know about it yet. Her C1 and C2 are separated. Her spine is broken. She can't even breathe on her own without that tube in her neck. It's safe to say her boxing career is done. Then Frankie blames himself for training her. I'm like, dude, this wasn't your fault. She was fighting against a dirty piece of shit. There's obviously more than that for him for feeling guilty. I wish they would have told us what his daughter was like. He called up every hospital in the United States just to see if they could fix her. One was actually able to get her in a wheelchair after a couple hours, but even with that, she still couldn't remove the tubes. Frankie called her family, and she's been waiting by the window to see if a visit, but none of them came yet. And a couple weeks later, they finally decided to show up after going to fucking Disneyland. And to make matters worse, the only thing they really want is for her to sign these papers so they won't be responsible for the house. There's other stuff in the paperwork, but I'm like, ain't that some bullshit? But she finally stands up to her mom and is like, fuck that shit, figure it out your own damn way. And because she hasn't been able to move, she's been developing skin cancer. On her leg, it was so bad they had to cut her leg off. They have a little bit more conversation. Then out of nowhere, she asks them to just pull the plug for me. I'm like, what the fuck, man? She said she's done everything she wanted to do, she had her shot, and knowing that she's not going to be able to do the one thing that she's always wanted to do, hell, at this point she could barely even move. And he wants Frankie to end it for her. And Frankie knows he can't do it, but he's stumbling with the realization that he might have to. Especially when he comes back from the bathroom to find out that she's been trying to bite her own tongue just so she could bleed to death. It got so bad they had to put gauze in her mouth and then, put a sedative in her. They had to keep the gauze in her mouth because when they put the stitches on, she tried to bite the stitches off. So we went back to the priest to get some guidance on this situation, and even the priest is telling him he can't stop this from happening. Next day he goes to see her, and she's so doped up that she looked like she's in a vegetative state at this point. So at night he goes back to the gym to pack his bag, has a conversation with Scraps one last time, heads over to the hospital, and he's gonna grant her a wish. He disconnects her air machine and injects her with a lethal dose of adrenaline, and that's it. In the shadows, Scraps was following him, and that was the last time he saw Frankie. When Scraps came back to the gym, Danger came back, and now he's ready to work. Scraps actually wrote a letter to Frankie's daughter. The last shot we see is Frankie in the mist at that pie shop that Maggie took him to that one time. Man, I go through a range of emotions every time I see this movie. The $1 Million Baby on Netflix. Check it out. Like, click, subscribe, do all that. You know what time it is. Like these, y'all, the easy, Mr. Big, you goddamn slogan.